Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to be able to speak to the House tonight about the ongoing convoy protest movement that's happening across the country, as well as about the federal mandates that have spawned this response. And let me say at the outset that I think it is so important when people have disagreements about important public issues that they take the time to talk to each other and try to understand each other's perspectives. And if there's a particular challenge at doing that in Canada, it's because we're such a vast country. People in different regions with different kinds of experiences or perspectives that are informed by their region have a maybe harder time engaging in that dialogue with people who live very far away. This is, I think, maybe further challenged by the fact that we're a bilingual country. So sometimes it's harder to have those conversations across those experiential, regional, or linguistic divides. And yet there's something about this convoy movement that has suddenly shrunk those geographic divisions, because people have come from all across the country to be in Ottawa to express significant concerns that they have. So members of Parliament now have an opportunity to go out and talk to some of the people who are here and to ask them, why are you here? To look at what signs and symbols they're waving or not waving, and to take that opportunity to engage in that dialogue. And what's incredible to me is that by all indication there are many members of Parliament, many people who will participate in this debate tonight, who don't seem to have really taken the opportunity to look around, to try to talk to people, to try to understand. And I would challenge any member who hasn't done it, tonight, tomorrow, go outside. There are people right in front of this building, and ask them, what's your experience? Did you lose a job? Did you have a family lose a job? Did you lose a business? Did someone you care about get affected by this in some way? Do you know someone who's experienced suicidal ideation for the first time because of lost opportunity or social isolation that came about as a result of the pandemic? What are the experiences in your life that have led you to come and take this fairly drastic step? There are many people I know here who are protesting for the very first time. So let's try to understand. Let's ask those questions. Mr. Speaker, I got the call from Sebastian in our lobby, who does great work for us on the Conservative side, at about 6:45, telling me that I would have an opportunity to speak tonight. So as I was thinking through, what am I going to do to prepare? Usually I sit in my office and look things up and work in front of my computer, but instead what I decided to do is just go out and talk to people. And I've done a little bit of this before, but try to be intentional about asking people, what has brought you here? And what are the things that you maybe are seeing reflected in the conversation that are not representative or are representative? Because I think it's important for us as members of Parliament to take that opportunity to try to understand. And many people told me that they came here because they were deeply concerned about mandate policies. They believe in this core principle of individual autonomy, the individual ability to make choices about your own health without being threatened with job loss as a result of it. And I think it's objectively the case that Canada's approach when it comes to vaccine mandates is far more draconian than many other countries around the world. For instance, countries in Europe have an alternative that's based on natural immunity. And yet Canada doesn't seem to recognize that. So it's interesting for me because you could say, well, this is the science. We're not including natural immunity because it's the science, and yet it's the same science in Europe, or it should be. It's the same virus, right? So these are legitimate questions. Why don't we have the option to consider natural immunity, to consider a rapid test that would allow people, especially truckers, people who are working alone, or public servants who are working from home? Why aren't these reasonable accommodations when an individual wants to exercise autonomy over themselves and their own body? I think those are reasonable questions. But, you know, I had a lot of conversations with different people when I was out just talking to some of the people who was there. I met a young man who actually voted NDP in the last election. I don't know if he will again after some of the things that have been said. I talked to people a little bit about some of the questions raised in the media about hateful symbols, because we've certainly seen some of those photos. And what I was told is that in the very small number of instances where people put forward symbols of hate, they were actively told by other protesters, put that away. We don't want to see that here. That's not representative of what we're doing. Objectively, if you walk up and down Wellington Street, what you'll see is people waving Canadian flags. You'll see people with various signs expressing messages about mandates. And, you know, and I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. So I think particularly for my family, the fact that somebody was walking around, one person, maybe two people were walking around with a swastika, I think that's incredibly offensive. And obviously that strikes something in me that's different from other members who don't have that same family experience. The reality is that these individuals were told to leave by other protesters. Were told that they were not welcome there, that their message was not the message that other people were trying to present. I spoke with a young man who's at the protest who told me he was gay. He told me he brought a pride flag with him, and he wasn't bothered by anyone. Nobody had a critical comment about that. And I spoke with many people who were visible minorities. I spoke with a number of Jewish gentlemen who had come from Montreal to see the protest. And you know, there is this representation in the media and in the comments of other members as if this is just a sea of people all waving Confederate flags or something. And that's just not what's happening. Objectively, whatever side you're on, that's just objectively not what's happening. So let's start by just looking around and listening to what the objective facts are on the ground here, trying to understand what the source of those concerns are. And maybe recognizing that people who have lost their jobs, who are being told they cannot work alone by themselves in their truck, they can't work from home as a public servant, that they can't travel in the context of a family emergency or whatever the case may be, people that are affected by these mandates, who are prepared to take other precautions like get a rapid test, that they may have a point. I think they do have a point. I agree with them in saying that these federal mandates should end. Mr. Speaker, we should end the federal mandates not because of the protests, but because it's the right thing to do to end the federal mandates. Because the federal mandates simply don't make sense as policies when it comes to vaccination. Now, we've talked about the impacts that these mandates have had on other people, and our party has consistently taken, I think, a very reasonable approach in saying that employers should take appropriate measures to secure the safety of their workplaces. If you are in the public service, for example, if someone is choosing to exercise their autonomy not to get vaccinated, then they should take a rapid test if they're coming into the office. A lot of people are still working from home. But the availability of testing is a good alternative. And in fact, we know there are many breakthrough infections, right? And so even for those who are vaccinated, getting regular rapid tests is a pretty good idea. I would think it would be reasonable under the circumstances of the Omicron variant, for example, to say rather than having a vaccine mandate for air travel, that simply everybody has a rapid test before they fly. Now, we've had problems with the availability of rapid tests because the government only discovered rapid tests, it seems, about 2 years into this process, and now they want to be congratulated for, 2 years later we're procuring rapid tests, right? And 2 years from now we'll be having better ventilation in schools. Well, folks, you're too late. You're just too late. We should have been talking about rapid tests right out of the gate, deploying a system of widely available rapid tests before the vaccination was even available. And then we would be ahead. Mr. Speaker, we could be where other countries are. Many other countries, many other jurisdictions around the world are now lifting their restrictions completely. And yet the government is continually talking about ways to further tighten mandates, to further squeeze the very small portion of the population that is not vaccinated. The fact is, the vast majority of Canadians have gotten vaccinated. The small minority who have chosen not to get vaccinated, I think it's fair to assume at this point they're probably not going to get vaccinated. So at this point, it's time to say, well, we have the reality of COVID. It's going to be with us. Most people are going to choose to get vaccinated. Some people are going to choose not to. We believe in this principle of individual freedom and autonomy. And we can't function very well as a country if the government continually wants to fire and otherwise penalize people who exercise their autonomy. So I would say it's time to lift the mandates, and it's time to work towards getting back to normal. Of course, we can continue to take appropriate precautions in response to events that come up. But the level of restrictions on individual freedom, the level of coercion, is not something that I think any of us would have thought possible in this country 2 years ago. These were supposed to be temporary measures. But now, Mr. Speaker, it very clearly is time to move on. It's time to look to the future. Because continually finding new ways to squeeze that small minority of the population who are not vaccinated isn't going to change anything. It's not going to move us forward. It's not going to actually allow us to get out of this. Mr. Speaker, people who have never protested before are coming here to say they want to be able to work. They don't want to be fired from their job for exercising personal autonomy. They don't want to be seeing empty grocery store shelves. They don't want to have long delays for accessing immigration services because people are being laid off because of these mandates. Mr. Speaker, let's end the mandates because it's the right thing to do.